Okay, Cliff, I am unmuting myself, turning my camera on. If you could just give me a heads up that I am coming in loud and clear.
You are.
Okay, cool. So I'll start doing some of the housekeeping stuff for a few minutes or so as some people continue to make their way into the Zoom program. But I just want to first welcome everyone to our program this afternoon. We have a small crowd in the Government Services Center with us today. We have an even larger crowd joining us online via Zoom. I will say, like most of us, we are very familiar with Zoom at this point. 2 years into this crazy time, we are all experts on Zoom. But I will say this is the first time that we are trying a hybrid format. So again, some people are with us in the room. Some people are joining us from online. There's a whole bunch of moving components with audio and tech. If there's any issues, my colleague Cliff will be jumping in and kind of giving me a heads up. So don't be surprised if you hear his voice. If anything goes really terribly wrong, we hope that's not the case, but we will continue to have the presentation for those of us in the room today. And worst case scenario, we will reschedule the online part for time next week. But again, we're hoping that doesn't happen. But again, this is the first time we're trying this unique setup. So just cut us some slack if there's any tech issues. Secondly, there was an overwhelmingly positive response to this program. We have over 100 people signed up to attend this program. So you have all sent a very clear message to us that you are not only interested in this research, you want us to do more programming, and we heard you loud and clear. So we will certainly be offering more programming like this, not only on property research, but we also do some genealogy programs like this and some basic local history. We really are encouraged by the overwhelming response we got for this program. And with that said, we are also recording this program. So after the event, everyone will receive an email with a link to the recording. It will be live for about 30 days. Afterwards, we will take it down just so we can offer this program again and without having it, exactly the same program up online. And the programs we will offer in the future will be a little bit more complicated because today's program is a very basic, how do you get started? I'm going to throw a whole bunch of information at everyone. But property research, it's hard. It's really complicated stuff. So your head will be spinning, and that's normal. So the programs we'll have in the future will be a little bit more complicated, a little bit more hands-on. And most importantly, you have our email. Again, we will be emailing everyone the video. We will be emailing everyone a property research guide. And that email is an open invitation to have a conversation with us. If you're doing property research after this presentation and you have questions, you don't know where to go to next, send us an email. There's a very small department. It's myself and our assistant archivist. We're the two who monitor that email. So don't think if you email us, your email will get lost in some bureaucratic, county office. It's a very small one. If you email us, it will be myself or our assistant archivist, who's also familiar with research or property research, will be the ones answering that email. So please take advantage of us. We are a county department, free, open to the public. We're happy to help with your research. So with that said, I'm going to turn off the camera just so that's not taking up any screen room, and we can get started. First, I just want to set expectations with what do we mean by this term property research. Property research is a very broad umbrella term. Some of you might be interested in researching your house. Some of you might be interested in researching a local cemetery you pass every day, or an old barn, or a spring house, or you think there was a grist mill on your property. Property research encompasses all of that. And we are going to be looking at property research specifically through the lens of county government records. And what do I mean by county government records? Well, think about any time you come in contact with your local county government, which is probably going to be Chester County. We pay taxes to Chester County. If we have property sales, we file deeds, we go to court, we file wills. The county has been collecting that paper trail all the way since 1682, since Chester County was founded, and it continues to do that today. So that's about 300 years worth of county government records we can look at to do property research, connecting the past, again, 1682, with the present. So those are going to be the records we look at today when we talk about property research. If you are interested in researching a specific building, unfortunately, county government records aren't going to be the most insightful. You can do a lot with county government records, but unfortunately, if you're looking for a specific construction date, that might not be what you find using county government records, because generally speaking, county records don't have specific details about buildings, right? The county is interested in property, the assessment of the property, the actual land, generally what the overall worth of the property. They're not going into specifics information about different buildings. If they did, that would be great. That would make our lives so much easier as researchers, but unfortunately, these county records aren't created for you and I as researchers. They're created for very legal purposes. So there's a lack of specific historical research information. If you want to date buildings, you might have to use other research methods, right? You might have to do some architectural history. There are people who get very advanced degrees studying architecture. They can tell you based on the material of the building, what time period it's from, or based on the design. Oh, that looks like something that was built in the 1790s. Looks like something that matches design patterns in the 1820s. So if you want to date the building, you might have to look at county records and architectural history. If you're looking at, a grist mill or a barn, you might have to do some do some general archaeology history. So this is just one way to do property research, and unfortunately, again, for buildings, is not the most specific and detailed methodology. But what we can do is, again, because the county has been creating a paper trail, we can start with what we know. We know who currently owns the property, and we can work all the way back until the very first property record for any individual property. Some go all the way back to the 1680s, all the way to William Penn. Some goes back to 1790. But point being, we can take what we know with the current records and work ourselves all the way back to the very earliest ones. And that is what we call building a chain of title. And this information, what is a chain of title? What do I mean by this? This is all the list of every single owner who owned the property and the years they owned it from. We can get that information using county records. And if you want to look for photographs or maps or maybe architectural plans or private family papers or things like that, you can take the names that are included in this chain of title and access that information with the names and the dates that you build with the chain of title. Let's see. And the chain of title, again, we start with the most recent. So I will show you, if there's one thing you walk away with today, it's going to be how do you find the most recent information for any single property in Chester County. That's what we know. We can start with that. That's going to be the first link in our chain. And we're going to go to the previous deed and the previous deed. And that's going to form a chain. And again, we're going to try to see if we can take it all the way back to the original patent. But if every patent that was filed in Chester County before 1776 is from the Penn family, right? Because the Penn family, they were the proprietary government before Pennsylvania was a state. Pennsylvania didn't become a state until 1776, so now we have a state government. Before 1776, all original land patents are coming from the Penn family. So in a perfect world, that's what we do with county records. Start with what we know, the current deed, go all the way back until the original patent. So that's what the steps we're going to look at today. So again, if there's anything we take away today, it's going to be one, how do you locate the most recent property information for any property in Chester County? And two, how do you access the most recent record for every property? Fortunately, in Chester County, we have this great system called Chesco Views. And I will, after the next slide, we will all do a walkthrough on Chesco Views and how to access the information and how to navigate it. But Chesco Views, I like to think of it as a hybrid between like Google Maps and the Tax Assessment Office. Basically, it's a GIS database that overlays all the most recent tax parcel information on every single property in Chester County. This is all public record, so we can go to a property, put a pin on it, and know who owns it, what's the property assessment value, and where is the most recent deed for that property recorded. That's going to be our starting point. Once we know where the deed was recorded, right, we need to know what book it's in and what page it's on. We're going to get that information from Chesco Views. Once we have the reference information, that's when we're going to go to the Recorder of Deeds office. And fortunately, in Chester County, in late 2020, the Recorder of Deeds office, they made every single deed ever filed in Chester County from the 1680s through the present day. We can access every single one of those records on the Recorder of Deeds website. So again, I will show you how to do that. So if you walk away with anything today, it's going to be knowing how to use Chesco Views and knowing how to access the records that are available at the Recorder of Deeds office. Before this new system was in place, it was a little complicated. People had to, if you were accessing a deed that was filed between 1919 and the present day, you had to go to the Recorder of Deeds office. If you wanted to access anything from the 1680s to 1918, you'd have to go to the archive. So there was this division before. Now you can do all of this work from the convenience of your home computer. So we will show you how to do that. So first, I'm going to show you all Chesco Views. So I'm going to leave the presentation and Chesco Views, just go ahead and type in Chesco Views, and it's going to be the very first one that you see in Google, the Google results. The official web address is arcweb.chesco.org. I think Cliff is going to provide this in the chat box, and it will be in the property research guide I will email you all after this program. But go ahead and open up Chesco Views, and I will give everyone a fair warning. Chesco Views can be a little slow to load. You wouldn't believe how much data is in this program. So we should be a little lenient and understand that with this much data, it's going to take some time to load. But you can navigate this in one of two ways. You can zoom all the way into the property you're researching, click on the information tab and just drop it. So if you might not know the actual mailing address, that's all right. Just go to where it's located and drop the information tab. But let's say you know the specific address. Maybe it's your property. Maybe it's a neighbor's property, a family's property. For me, I'm going to search the most recent deed information for the property that we're currently standing on right now. We are in a county building, so I'm going to know, okay, when was this deed recorded? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the find section, and I'm just going to type in the mailing address, right? So I'm currently at 601. I'm on West Town Road. And sometimes it's smart, so it's going to assume it knows where I want to go. And it's important to know that the municipality is important, right? So right now we have a West Chester mailing address, but we are currently in West Goshen Township. So just understanding that distinction. And I don't have to do this because Chesco Views has already assumed they know where I'm searching for. So then you see the property that I'm interested in is already highlighted in red right here. And this is basically what the county identifies as the current property boundaries of this particular property. It's not perfect, there will be mistakes, but generally speaking, this is what the county recognizes as the property lines of this particular property. Let's say I want to find out, okay, when was this property purchased by the county? All I have to do is go to the Information I tab at the very top here, and then I'm going to click on it, and it's going to open up a pop-up box. When it opens up the pop-up box, I go all the way down until you see more. Click on that, and that's going to open up a new tab showing you the most recent parcel details for this particular property. Again, we know it's owned by Chester County, and it's going to tell us the size of the property. It's going to tell us the last assessment information. It's going to tell us, let's see, when the property was purchased. So Chester County purchased this property that we're currently standing on in 1990. Where was that information recorded? Well, it was recorded in Record Book 1936, page 364. So again, you're going to use Chesco Views to get the information about any property. I'm sorry, I was hearing something weird. So, okay, now you're thinking, okay, well, how do I access that actual record? That's when you're going to go to the Recorder of Deeds website. So what I always do is Chester County Recorder of Deeds. Again, this link will be in that property research guide we all send you. You go to, this is the Recorder of Deeds home site. And if you're looking for the actual records, you're going to want to go down to record search here at the very bottom. Now, it's important to know, again, we are looking for a deed that was filed in 1990. There are going to be two systems with the Recorder of Deeds office. There's the Eagle Web. Eagle Web is the system you use to access any deed from 1994 to the present. I will open that up. Again, we are looking for a deed in 1990, so this is not the system we will use, but we're just going to acknowledge the disclaimer, log in as a member of the public. And if we had a deed, let's say from 2000, this is where we would put that book number in, and the page number, it would load and it would give us access to the record. And I'm going to show you that in their other system in a minute. Oops. But again, that's Eagle Web 1994 through the present. If you want anything from 1680s through 1994, you're going to use this IQS search here. Because our deed that we're looking for is from 1990, that's the one we're going to open up. You don't have to have an account. You can just log in. Oops, excuse me, search as a guest, I should say. And we know, based on Chesco Views, we are looking for record book 1936, page 364. So we're going to type in 36. And I will say, there's going to be two type of records you want to pay attention to here. There's going to be the deeds and the record books. You will start recognizing what a deed book is because typically it's a letter followed by a number. We'll take a look at some examples later on. If it's just a number, you can probably assume it's going to be a record book. So I know because I did this beforehand that book 1936 is a record book. And when you hit enter, it's going to load that individual book up. And then you just type in the page number you're looking for. It's always important to make sure the number you type in the search box there is the one that matches at the very bottom. Sometimes, and we'll see examples of this, you're 100 off because the PDF number doesn't always match up with the physical book number. This one, it conveniently does. And we'll take a look, make sure this is the deed we're looking for. We see, yep, CLX Realty is a corporation from Delaware and it's selling a property to Chester County. So that's a very quick tutorial on how to use Chesco Views and Recorder of Deeds. We'll come back to this because I want to next go on to how do you interpret a deed. Deeds are pretty complicated legal documents. There's a whole bunch of legal jargon tightly packed into them. They can be a little intimidating, especially when you start working with really old ones, right? If you go back to the 1770s and you're reading that really old cursive handwriting with legal language, it can be a bit intimidating to get started. But what I'm going to do now is show you how to easily read deeds because they're very easy to just extract the information from if you know what you're looking for. But so we will come back to this. But again, just want to remember, you get the information from ARC or Chesco Views, you get the records from the Recorder of Deeds website. I'm going to go back to the presentation now. And again, deeds, they can be intimidating at first, but they can be very easy to interpret. Generally speaking, I like to reduce deeds down into three main parts. You're going to have the introduction. That's going to give you a general introduction to the parties involved in the transaction. The second part is going to be a physical description of the property. And the third part, this is the really most useful one for us if we're looking to do research, is the recital clause. Basically, the recital clause is referring back to a previous deed. And the recital clause is going to give us the history of the property. So that's going to be the links that we're looking for, right? We're building a chain of title. The recital clause is how we get those individual links back to previous deeds. So let's first take a look at the introduction. And on these next few slides, you'll notice, let me pull out Spotlight here. So you'll notice there are two deeds here. There's this modern one. This is the one we just looked at. It's from 1990. And this is for the property, again, that we're currently situated on. This deed down here is from 1785, and it's also for the property that we're currently situated on. So 200 years separated, but I'm going to use these two as an example. 200 years separated, but generally speaking, they include the same information. And this is the introduction part of a deed. The introduction is going to introduce the grantor, fancy way of saying seller, and grantee, someone purchasing the property. So again, it's going to introduce the individuals involved in the transaction. It's going to say their names. A lot of times you're going to get the name of a spouse, especially if someone is selling property, because the law would have said, okay, this family is selling the property. So you're going to get the name of the husband and the wife. Sometimes you're going to get where these individuals are living, because even if they're selling property in West Goshen, they might be from Westchester or they might be from Philadelphia. Thirdly, you might get an occupation. If further back in time, you're typically just going to see farmer or yeoman or very broad vague terms like that. For property research, this might not be the most useful information, but it can be a good indicator to indicate whether or not you're researching the right property. Let's say, for example, you're in 1820 and you're looking at a deed from someone named John Smith. And you're looking at it and you know the person that you're researching is a farmer, and you know that they're married to a woman named Elizabeth. If you're reading a deed and it says the wife of John Smith, her name is Rachel, and this John Smith is a blacksmith, right? Then you're like, okay, this might not be the property that I'm researching. So 9 times out of 10, the deed will match the one you're looking for. But I always like doing a quick glance at the introduction just to make sure, one, the names match the subjects that I'm researching, their wives, the names of their spouses match, their occupation match, their residency match, things like that. So there can be useful clues in the introduction. So in this example here, again, we have CX Realty. The deed is telling us they're from Delaware and, of course, Chester County. In this one down here from 1785, what do we see here? We see Isaiah Matlack of Goshen Township. He's a yeoman, and Mary, his wife. So we get all that useful biographical information. This is especially useful for genealogists. There's a lot of genealogical information in deeds, and that typically comes from the introduction part. But again, that's just the first section of the deed, just the introduction. The second part, this is going to be the physical description of the property, and there's a few moving parts of the physical description. Again, we have the 1990 deed up here. You see this phrase, all that certain messuage and tract of land situated in the township of Goshen. What the heck does that word messuage mean? This is a really important word. It's a word that has traditionally been used mainly in the southeast part of Chester County. So if you go to New Jersey or Maryland or Delaware, you might not see this term messuage, but typically it has been a word to describe a dwelling house. So basically in 1990, this deed is saying they're selling a tract of land and a messuage. So they're saying when we sell this property, there is a dwelling house on the structure. There are issues with that term. A lot of people get very excited because if we're researching a house, we're going to assume it's the house that we're interested in. But we will get into the problems of that term messuage here in a minute. But it also is telling us in the physical description where the property is located. So it's situated in West Goshen Township. That makes sense. We are currently in West Goshen Township. If we pivot down to the bottom here in the 1785 deed, what do we see here? See, I could have highlighted this for you. So again, this 1990 deed, there's a messuage on it, there's a dwelling house. In 1785, it just says a tract of land. This implies when it was sold in 1785, there's no building on the property. Again, the second part, the first one, it says West Goshen. 1785, it just says Goshen. So that is another useful bit of information, is be aware of the name changes of the municipality. So if you're in, let's say, Westchester, just realize Westchester formed in 1786. So there's going to be no Westchester before 1786. West Goshen formed in 1817. Before that, it was just called Goshen Township. So if you look for a deed that was filed in West Goshen Township in 1785, it's not going to exist because West Goshen didn't exist. Rather, it was Goshen Township. So you just want to be aware of the changing names of the municipalities. And we have a guide on our website that kind of talks about the different name changes of the municipalities. So just be aware of that information as well. And the third part here, you're going to get the physical description or the meets and bounds, basically the survey of the property. This is where you're going to get degrees and angles and purchase. Some people always laugh because they're reading the deed and all of a sudden it starts talking about, 35 degrees 8 purchase from this stone to a tree, to a creek, to another rock, to someone's property. So you get this really vague description. But that's how they would have surveyed property back then. And you think about what George Washington did, right? This is what George Washington was before he was the George Washington. He was a surveyor in the backcountry of Virginia. So when people wanted to settle land, George Washington, he would go out and say, okay, your property, the lines of your property are from this tree to this rock to this creek. So of course that tree and rock aren't going to be there, but That's when they resurvey the property. So you do see more modern language and more recent deeds. But those are generally the three parts of the physical description. Again, it's going to talk about whether there are buildings or whether it's just a tract of land. It's going to tell you what property or what municipality it's in, and that's going to give you a quick survey, the meets and bounds of the property. And we will go into each, a little bit more into each of these here in a minute. So let's go back to that word Messuage. Again, it's typically used in the southeastern part of Chester County, but it's not very descriptive. Messuage, it could mean a grand two-story stone dwelling house, or it could mean a log cabin. It just meant there is a structure here that someone resides in. It's someone's main dwelling house. So if you see a deed that says Messuage, you can assume there might be a dwelling house there. If you see it's just a piece or parcel of land, you can assume, okay, at the time of the transaction, there was just land here. This isn't a bulletproof system though, however. Here's a good example where it does work effectively. This is a deed from 1838. If we read the description here, all that certain Messuage, so again, that's 1838. 1836, it just says all that piece of land. So this is for the same property. So we know, okay, in 1836, the property was sold. It was just a tract of land. 1838, it was sold again, and it's saying there was a Messuage on it. So we might assume, okay, maybe there was a structure there built between those years. You shouldn't always rely on that because sometimes they just they reuse the same language in a deed. So a deed might have been taken out in 1780, and they're just going to recycle the same exact language 20 years later. So it's not a bulletproof system, but in this case, if you look at the tax records for the property, you get this really nice note saying, lately there was a stone house erected. So it can work, but I'm going to give you an example, a hypothetical example where it doesn't work. So let's say, again, you're looking at the deeds, you're doing your chain of title, you're reading an 1850 deed, it says Messuage. You're on the right track. 1830 deed, you're saying, okay, the deed mentions Messuage again. So you're going to assume there's a dwelling house on the property. Then you get to 1800 and you say, oh, it's just land. So you might assume, okay, my house was probably built between 1800 and 1830. But let's say, for example, maybe in 1802, there was a log house built there. That explains why then in 1830, that deed is going to say Messuage, because that log house is a Messuage. It's a dwelling place. Let's say in 1840, the same property, there's a new building built. It's a stone house. 1841, hypothetically again, that original log dwelling house, it's destroyed because the property doesn't need the family doesn't need two new property or dwelling houses. They have this new structure. So that 1850 deed, it makes sense why you have the term Messuage. So it's a useful term that you should always take note of anytime you see it in a deed, but just be aware it's not a bulletproof methodology. Again, because there could be discrepancies in which building they're actually talking about. And again, they have a tendency to recycle the same language. Think about the remoteness of Chester County in the 1770s, for example. If a property was sold in 1770, someone came out here to survey the property. They said, okay, there's a dwelling house on the property. 1780, they're selling the same property. They probably just used the same exact language. The property may have changed. The structure might not have been there anymore, but people aren't coming all the way out here to take a look at the property. So they're just going to copy and paste the same language in the new deed. So with this example, you might have to look at some other county records. And then let's talk about the meets and bounds. Again, we're talking about purchase angles. This is really useful if you want to see the shape of the property. Fortunately, there are a few software programs where you can take all those wild measurements, extract them, write them out, and basically put them in software and see the shape of the property. What we use at the archive, it's a paid software. It's called Deed Mapper. It's really nice because you can overlay all the properties on a map. And so you can see how the property fits in onto a map. But there's a really nice version, free version online called Tract Plotter. Again, so if you're looking at this deed, the meets and bounds section of a deed, you can extract all the information, all the measurements, take the measurements, plug them in to Tract Plotter or Deed Mapper, and get the shape of the property. But again, those were just, I know that was a lot of information, but that was just the second part of the deed. We have the introduction, we have the physical description that I just went over. The third part, the third and most useful part for us is going to be the recital clause. Anytime someone sold property, so if I'm selling property to you, I have to state how I am the legal owner of the property. The county wanted to make sure that you were actually the owner and you had a legal right to the property. So the recital clause is basically giving a history of the property. So if we're looking at this 1990 deed for the property that we're currently on, the recital clause says it's the same premise which Richard Matlatt and Elizabeth, his wife, by the 1987 deed, and it says where it's recorded, they sold it to CLX Realty. So this 1990 deed, CLX is selling property to Chester County. CLX has to say how they acquired the property, and they're doing that right here in the recital clause. In the perfect world, every deed is going to have a recital clause, but the further back in time you go, you're not always going to have a recital clause. Sometimes deeds weren't just recorded, and that makes sense. Chester County was very far away from the county seat. Think about, before 1786, Westchester wasn't the county seat. The county seat was in the city of Chester, all the way on the Delaware River. And think about people up in Coventry Township. To get to the county seat to have these deeds recorded would have been a day-long trip. For some people, they just didn't have their deeds recorded. So you might not always have a recital clause, but this is going to be basically your clue to where you go next. And we'll look at an example here in a minute. But the 1990 deed, so the property that we're currently on actually has two properties. You see a description here and a description here. We're going to go with this shorter one because it's a good example. It has some nice examples in it. So, whoops. So let me go back out to the 1990 deed that we looked at. Again, CLX selling it to Chester County. According to the recital clause, that deed is in record book 950. So if we wanted to go back, we just type in 950 and we go to that page. So this is going to be the deed of the CLX company purchasing the property. And here we have again, the introduction, Richard Matlatt and Elizabeth, his wife, they are selling to CLX. That's the introduction part that we just talked about. The physical description, all that certain message, that implies to me in 1987, there was a dwelling house on the property and a tract of land situated in West Goshen. These are all good signs. Then you get that physical description. The next thing we're looking for is the recital clause. Being the same premise, which James Logue and Florence, his wife, they sold it to the Matlatt family in 1953. Where's that transaction recorded? That's in deed book K26. So you see how this one has a letter followed by a number. That indicates to me it's a deed book as opposed to a record book. So I'm just going to go up here, change it to deeds, and let's type in K26, hit enter. And we're looking for page 259. This is an example of something. You see, I typed in 259, but page 234. So you see there's a mismatch between the system and the original record. So I'm just going to want to go to the original page number. So we see 259 here, Logue to Matlatt. Again, those are the names we're looking for. All that certain message, that's the word that implies to me there's a dwelling house on the property, West Goshen Township, description, recital clause. So again, those are the three parts of a deed. How did this person get it? And was in deed book Y23, page 36. We could go to that one as well. Let's take you to the very first deed for this property, which I have written down here. It's G218. So I want to go to G2. So you saw how those deeds look. Those are nice typescript. We're familiar with the visual appearance of that form of writing. Let's take a look at what a deed looked like in 1785. So you have, of course, the cursive handwriting packed together on a tight piece of page, but it's going to, again, include the same information. Isaiah Matlack, this is the introduction part of the property, or the deed, I should say. And it's going to get, this part, the recital clause is at the very beginning of the property. So this one is referring all the way back to a patent. Patent book A, volume 2, page 3, 15. So when you see when you see a deed refer to a patent, that it means you cannot go back any further with English records. Because again, the patents are coming from the Penn family before 1776 or the state after 1776. And that means that is the first time the property was settled. So if you see patent, that means you can't go back any further and your chain of title is complete, assuming, of course, you had a complete run. So this is the complete chain of title for the property that we are currently on. Again, remember, we started with Chester County. The county has owned this property since 1990. We looked at these first few. I took note of the size of the property and whether or not there was a mess switch, whether or not there was a dwelling house on the property. And I took it all the way back to William Penn, right? We see that patent. We just saw it in the deed we looked at. That means we can't go back any further. This is the chain of title. Then we can take these names and we can look for photographs. We can look for maps. We can look for family papers if we want to really understand the history of the building, of the property that we're researching. You see here that mess switch, and in this case, it is a good example because we know there was a dwelling house on the property in 1826 when Joel Matlack inherited it from his father, George Matlack. George Matlack purchased the property in 1785. So what property is this? Well, this is the Matlack house out front. So everyone in the room, when you leave, you will probably see the Matlack house. And we know it was probably built around 1811. And this is a case where that term mess switch, it does imply, it applies. We trace it all the way back to 1826. We know there was a dwelling house there. 1785, there wasn't. And then we can look at the tax records to determine, okay, when was there, might have been a structure erected. You see, though, there weren't only deed books mentioned. Sometimes there was an unrecorded deed. Sometimes the property was passed down through a will, through inheritance. So you had to look at wills. Sometimes the property would have been sold at sheriff's sale. So you're not always going to be using deeds. You're going to have to use other county records. And we can take a look at some of them here right now. One of them is going to be estate files. Again, if I have a property and I want to leave it to my sons, I am going to write that in my will. Therefore, there's not going to be a need for a deed. The will is going to be the legal language. So if you see in the recital clause, so-and-so inherited the property from their father, then you're going to want to take a look at the father's will to see, what did they say about this property? So estate files are really important pieces in property research. Sheriff sales. Sometimes the court would order the county sheriff to take property and sell it, and that the sales of that property would cover the cost of a debt that was owed. So if I, for example, if I was sued because I owed someone money and I basically said, hey, I don't have the money to repay this debt, the county would order the sheriff to sell the property, and they would use those funds to reimburse the person I owed money to. This is useful because the county sheriff sales will refer back to the previous owner. So in this example, we know the county sheriff sold property to George Matlack. Where did the property come from? Well, it came from Caleb Matlack. So then that's a clue. Okay, we need to start looking at Caleb Matlack and see how he acquired the property. What can be really useful about sheriff sales is sometimes the county sheriff would publicize the property in a local paper. So if the county sheriff, he wants people to come out and bid on the property, he's going to put an advertisement in the local paper. And I'll give you an example of a property sale mentioned in a newspaper here in a minute. But he might say, hey, I have 150 acres out here in West Goshen. There's a nice log dwelling house on the property. Everything's clear. So it's going to give you a nice description of the property if there's a mention of it in a newspaper clipping. Tax records are some of my favorite records just because you can get really useful, detailed notes like the one we see here from 1837. In 1837, the tax assessor specifically mentions, hey, there's a new stone dwelling house on the property. Unfortunately, the one you're looking at, it's pretty rare. Tax assessors were very busy people. They didn't want to take the time to write out detailed information about the property. Typically, they want to be as quick and concise with their information as possible. So they wanted to streamline the process. So sometimes you just see buildings. You're not going to see the type of buildings. You're just going to see the county is going to tax this person because they have buildings on the property. What do they mean by buildings? They might mean a stone mansion. They might mean a spring house. They might mean a barn. You're not going to get that information. But what's really useful is you can see the size of the property. So in this one, we see here, there's 12 acres that they're being taxed for. So tax records can be really good, useful information into tracing the history of the property. Road papers are really nice because you can get some nice sketches. And if you know your property is along a road and you can identify when that road was laid out, and you basically take a look at the court papers that were filed to get that road laid out, you might see a draft, a survey of the road. And basically when the road was laid out, they used properties to describe the road. They said, okay, this road is going to go from this person's house to this person's barn to this person's property. And if they drew that, you might see little images of the property. Unfortunately, this collection is not the most accessible because, for example, Westtown Road out here, we just started calling this Westtown Road. Traditionally, it would have been called, the road from John Smith's property to Matlack's property. So it's going to have very vague descriptive terms like that. And if you're searching this collection, you have to know when they laid it out, they refer to it as the road from Smith's property to Matlack's property. So it's not the most accessible. It can be done. And if you're able to access it, you might be rewarded with some really useful and really amazing sketches like the ones you see on the screen now. Mechanic liens, this is like the gold mine. This is a record that would be incredible to get. Basically, if someone had work done on a property, they had a workman come out, whether that was a carpenter or a blacksmith, and they had work done on the property, and that workman, he was never paid. He could go to the county court and say, hey, I never got paid, and the county would put a lien on the property, basically saying this property cannot be sold until these workmen get recompensated. And the workmen would basically provide a list of all the building materials they laid out. They might describe the work they did on the property. So mechanic liens can be so insightful. Unfortunately, there had to have been a nasty, civil case involved with the property. So basically, someone had to go to court for a mechanic's lien to be filed. I have worked with researchers before, though, and basically using tax records, using that term messwich, they said, okay, I think my house was built between, let's say, 1830 and 1850, and I've had researchers who've found a mechanic's lien from 1835. So at that point, we know, okay, there's some type of construction process happening in 1835. So that might close the time frame of when your building was constructed even more. So mechanic liens can be very useful. And of course, maps and atlases. I love looking at maps and atlases. Most maps and atlases are going to have at least the names of the property owners. So this one over here, you see the names. You probably can't see it very well, but it lists basically roads, the names of property owners. And if you look really closely, there are going to be indicators whether or not there are buildings there. This is a 1874 one. The one over here, this is 1883. It's a little bit more detailed because you're actually going to see the property line. So in 1883, this is what the property lines would have looked like when they created this map. If you go to our website, which I'll try to remember to get to now, we have a link called Helpful Links. If you click on Helpful Links, we basically describe all the maps of Chester County that can be accessed remotely online. I talked about newspaper clippings before. Again, anytime a property went for public sale, whether that was through the sheriff's sale, whether or not there was something with the Orphans Court, basically someone died and they needed to sell property to cover the cost of the estate, they would have posted the sale notice in the local paper to encourage people to come out, check out the property, and put a bid on for the property. This is a really nice advertisement because it kind of tells you a little bit about the property. This is from 1776. It's for a property in Birmingham Township, right next to the Battle of Brandywine. It's for a property that I was researching And I wanted to know a little bit more about it. Fortunately, I knew the name of the owner, so I put his name into newspapers.com, and I saw that he was selling the property. I saw David Britton was selling the property. It says it's 140 acres, which have been cleared. So basically, there's no trees on the property, meaning it's good farmable property. Most importantly, though, it's a good log dwelling house. So we know in 1776, just a year before the Battle of Brandywine, there was probably a log dwelling house right across the street from the Birmingham Friends Meeting House. And we got this from a newspaper advertisement. So newspapers can be another useful find if you're able to find something. Everything I talked about, everything except for the maps and newspapers are county records, essentially. Those are the collections we have here at the Chester County Archives. We have records created by or filed with the county government. Our partners, our colleagues over at the Chester County History Center, they're going to have even more maps. There are a lot of maps you can access online, but if you've ever been to the Chester County History Center's library, they have drawers, and you pull out those drawers, there are so many more maps that you can only find at the Chester County History Center. So we recommend taking a look at the maps. They have incredible newspaper clippings. Again, you can find a lot of newspapers online. Most of the times you have to pay for them, like newspapers.com, that's a paid service. Chester County History Center, they have cabinets and cabinets and cabinets of newspaper clippings, organized by last name, organized by township, organized by subject. They can be good resources while looking for your property. Again, and if you know who the property owner or who owned your property in, let's say, during the Revolutionary War, and you want to know about their experiences, maybe research the person, right? Because homes and grist mills and you know, barns, those are buildings. The people inside them, the people who lived in them, the people who worked them, they're the ones who bring meaning to those buildings. So if you can find out more about the people, you're probably going to find out a lot more about the building itself. So if you're researching people, take a look at some of their manuscript collections. If all of this sounds really intimidating, I'm talking about recital clauses and deeds and meets and bounds. If that is a whole bunch of really intimidating language, there is a great collection called the Reed Gordon Title Company Collection. Basically, I think it was 1920s, 1910s, early 20th century, there was a company who got paid to do property research, essentially. So if they're researching this property, they generated a whole paper trail. They basically have the whole chain of title for the property from 1920 all the way back to the patent. The Reed Gordon and all those notes are at the Chester County History Center. It's not every property in Chester County, but you can go there, see if someone has done the history of your property and already have that research done. So it's a really useful collection. I rely on it every so often. I don't like to, because then we can get lazy. Oh, just take a look at the Reed Gordon collection. But it's a really good, if you hit any brick walls, you can take a look at what they did and see how they navigated any difficult properties. Photographs, people are always coming to us asking if we have photographs. Unfortunately, county government, they're not going out there photographing properties, but the History Center, they have over, I think, 80,000 photographs. I think if people realize just how great the photograph collection is, there'll be a lot more people taking advantage of it. So there might be a photograph of your property at the Chester County History Center. If you know the names of the owners, you can you can search the photograph collection using the names of the owners. So I would recommend taking a look at that. And of course, published secondary sources. If you're researching a relatively known or relatively historical property, chances are someone else has already done it too. They might have published a book about it. So see what type of research they did on the property. Again, it's one of those things where you don't want to rely too much, but I promise you will hit roadblocks. Property research is hard. It's hard for me to explain it until we roll up our sleeves and do it. It's really hard. So relying on what other people did is not always a bad thing. So hopefully with this presentation, I just threw a whole ton of information at you. A lot of it probably won't stick. Hopefully, if you remember anything, it's Chesco Views. It's the Recorder of Deeds. That's how you're going to get the most recent deed for any property. And thirdly, most importantly, remember our website, chesco.org/archives. There, you're going to see the helpful links. Under the helpful links tab, you're going to have a whole bunch of maps listed that you can access freely online. Records, guides, and indexes, all those records I talked about today, we're going to have nice write-ups on all of them. You can search them on records, guides, and indexes here. And most importantly, our email is listed right there. we encourage you all to take a shot at this yourself. Again, you will hit a roadblock. When you hit the roadblock, that's when you send us an email saying, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. How can you help us? We encourage you all to take advantage of us. And with that, again, I know that was a whole ton of information. I'm happy to answer questions. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up as closely to 1 o'clock as possible, just because there might be other reservations in this room. But I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm monitoring the chat box. We have a question here in the audience. Yes.
Can this work for Delaware County too, since that was part of Chester County way back when?
Delaware County, absolutely. Yep. Again, because all these county records are generated by state law. So the records we discuss here today will also be in Delaware County. The important thing to keep in mind is you will not find a single county record filed in Delaware County before 1789. Before 1789, Delaware County did not exist. So if you're looking for a deed, or if you're researching, let's say, a property in Lower Darby Township, you can do all that research at the Delaware County Archives until 1789, because all that paperwork was filed with the Delaware County government. Before that, though, they were filing things with Chester County because Lower Darby was a part of Chester County before 1789. So that's when those records are here with us. Because they were filing with the Chester County government, because they belong to the Chester County government, those are the records that we have here. So yep, you can absolutely do it. The only roadblock with them is your research will stop abruptly in 1789. That's when you're going to have to come use our resources here.
Is it set up the same way as this?
No, it's not. So they have a separate assessment office. They have a separate recorder of deeds. I think you can access a lot of that online as well, but it's not a mirrored image copy of what we saw here. But again, I think they do have a really nice digital presence like Chester County does, but I'm not certain on that. But that's a good question. Yep. So people are asking about different counties, whether or not they have similar systems. I'm not sure what every county has online, but Lancaster County, they're going to have an assessment office. They're going to have a recorder of deeds office. So they're going to have these records as well. Same with Bucks County, Philadelphia County, things like that. So this was generally tailored to Pennsylvania County. Someone asked whether or not Maryland and Delaware has this information as well. Deeds, taxes, of course, aren't exclusive to Pennsylvania. So other states are going to have these type of records as well. Just depending on where they're kept, I'm not sure. I know Delaware, the state of Delaware, for example, all county records and state records are kept with the Delaware Public Archives. That makes it a little easier. If you're doing any type of property research, you only have to go, regardless of what county, you just have to go to the Delaware Public Archives. So there's one central repository. Maryland, New Jersey, I'm not certain. Again, there's going to be deeds, there's going to be tax records. Where they're kept, I'm not exactly sure. Yes, we have a question in the audience.
When you talked about estate files and sheriff's sales and tax records, road papers, is all that available online too, or do we have to go to the office to look for that?
So all of that stuff is not, you can't access the original images online. You can use our website to get the information. So let's say, for example, you're looking for a will that was filed in 1820. You can go to our website under the records, guides, and indexes here, look for the name of the individual you're looking for, and that's when you can come to visit us in person or email us saying, hey, I'm looking for a will, whatever, and then we provide those copies for a charge. I will say we intend eventually to get every single one of our scanned images available on our website. Right now, you can only access the indexes, but we do intend on getting all of our images online eventually. Right now, we just don't have the digital infrastructure to do that. I don't want to put a timeline on that, but that's the way things are shaping up. But one day, in the hopefully not too distant future, you will be able to access the tax records, the wills, the road papers online. But right now, unfortunately, you're going to have to come visit us in person or email us asking for us to send you digital copies. So yep, this presentation has been recorded. I'm going to email everyone the link to it afterwards. So the lease release documents, those are more land records. Again, they are not available online. You're going to have to, I think it's the recorder of deeds, you're going to have to access them request those documents from the recorder of deeds for more contemporary records, the lease and release documents from the 1700s, 1800s, early 1900s. That's when you're going to use the records guides and indexes tab here, find the reference information, and then send us an email or visit us in person. Tavern petitions, one of those things, again, not available online. You can get the reference information, but you're going to have to come visit us to view the original records. But again, one day in the not too distant future, they all will be available online. So we have another question. Yes.
What is the historical society information? Do they have the same stuff or is it different? Or I guess you would start here first, right? And then go over.
Yep. So Historical Society, now they're known as the History Center. They just changed their name. So if people say Historical Society, History Center, we're meeting in the same building. Those were some of the collections I mentioned at the very end there. So like the maps, the newspaper clippings, the personal family papers, all those are all private collections. Everything that's at the History Center was donated by a member of the public. So that's a community collection. Everything we have here, it's public record. It was created by the county government. We don't have anything here that was donated by a member of the public. If someone finds an old dusty box up in grandma's attic and they think there's historic value there, they're going to take that stuff and donate it to the Historical Society. But again, here, everything we have is all government records. So they certainly complement each other, but they're very different collections. We always recommend people starting with our records. So you get that list of names and dates, and then you can take those names and dates and go search at the History Center. If you know someone owned it in 1920 and you want to see if there's a diary, then you can take that name and search their collection using the names and dates. Yes.
What about building permits to see about property improvements?
Okay, yep. So permits, things like that, that's not a county record, that's a municipal record. So a lot of people email us saying they want the building permits for their property. And all the permits that, at least in Pennsylvania, that information is kept and recorded by municipal government. So your local township, your city government, your borough council, things like that. So unfortunately, we don't have that stuff here because it's not a county record.
Thanks.
What information do the townships have? Anything?
That's a good question. I know some townships, not all townships, have historical commissions. And if you're researching a property, I bet you that your local township historical commission will know more about that property than we do. So they might have research files. So you might want to contact someone on the historical commission saying, hey, I'm researching this property. And they might be like, oh, so-and-so has already researched it. Here are notes on it. So if your township doesn't have a local historical commission, I don't know of any township records that will be useful off the top of my head. But we always recommend people to, if they're doing property research, reach out to the local township historical commission and see what they've already done. Cool. So someone's asked about Family Search. So I should explain the Recorder of Deeds website that I was showing you how to view the deeds. Unfortunately, if you want to download those images, you have to pay, I think, like 25 cents a page. There's also another system called Family Search. Family Search also has deeds from 1688 through 1922 available. Family Search is, think of it like Ancestry. It's just a free version of Ancestry. So if you're doing property research, I always why not sign up for Family Search? Plug in the names of the people you're researching, see what records Family Search has. It's free to join. There are some really useful records there. And you will find deeds on Family Search as well. Unfortunately, those you can't download as well. You can just view. But sometimes the quality of the image might be a little cleaner than what you saw on the Recorder of Deeds website. All right, everyone. It's about 1 o'clock. I thank you all so much for joining us. Again, give me about, maybe until the end of the day tomorrow to edit this video, put it up on our YouTube channel. I will, at that point, email you all with the link to the recording, a link to the property research guide. So everything I just talked about today, we have a guide for it, but it's a much more polished, clean presentation. So it's spelled out in a much more cohesive manner. So I will send you those emails, hopefully before the end of the weekend. So cool. And again, please do email us if you have any follow-up questions that we didn't address here. So cool. Thank you everyone so much and have a wonderful day.